So let's talk about water in Dune Awakening, one of the most important resources in the game and one that you're going to need consistently for just about everything you do throughout the game, especially once you hit the mid to late game. Water is going to become a resource that you're going to need more and more of, especially when it comes to refining all those ores into ingots. So let's talk about all the ways of getting water, which ones are going to be the most efficient and which ones you should be focusing your resources on, because not all the water gathering techniques are going to be created equal. Some of them are going to be a lot better than others, and you're going to need to know which ones are going to give you the best result. So let's start off right at the beginning and talk about the most basic form of water that is going to be on the flowers you're going to see around the map. Now these are going to allow you to drink water passively. You can be able to fill up 1 bar or 1/3 of your water meter by drinking these flowers. You won't be able to take it any further than that, and that is going to be your most basic form of getting water. Now this is not going to be very useful because you can't use it in your crafting recipes, at least not until you unlock something called the Dew Reaper very early on, and you can also combine that with something called a litter john, which will allow you to kind of store that water into the litter john, and then you can use that, maybe take it back to your base, store it in a water cistern, and then you can actually use it for crafting. Now this is going to be a bit of a tricky one to use because there's actually a couple of mechanics going on here. First of all, you can only harvest this water at night with the Dew Reaper, so you're also going to need a power pack equipped as well, and you're going to need to harvest only at night times. Now the interesting thing about this is different times during the night is going to give you better yields when it comes to the water. When it just turns nighttime, if you try use this, it will tell you that it is going to be poor efficiency and you won't get much water. You'll actually get almost nothing from this, so this is not going to be an efficient way to do it. Don't do this in the earliest stage of the night. Wait until when it's just before dawn. You can see this by pressing T if you're playing on PC, and this will show you at the top right hand corner kind of like a time cycle. You will also notice that closer towards dawn you will see there'll be like a little blue bar, and it will start becoming a brighter shade of blue just before the dawn. So you probably figured out by now that this is going to be the best time to harvest. When you do use the Dew Reaper towards the blue section of this dial, it will give you better yields, and it will tell you that it's going to be optimal yields when using it. This will give you a lot better water efficiency and help you fill up your lighter johns much quicker. I would also recommend that you also make use of multiple lighter johns, since these are actually going to fill up very fast. So you're going to want to craft a couple of these to make use of, because if you just go through maybe 2 or 3 water plant fields, this is going to give you a lot of water and potentially give you several thousands of water, which you're going to need to store somewhere to make use of. Now if you can time it right and wait for the brightest blue shade, this is going to be just before the dawn. You will start seeing that the sun will start coming out. This is going to be literally just before it becomes daytime. This will give you the best result, and this is going to give you the best efficiency. So if you do want to try use this as a water technique, it isn't a bad technique, but it does require a very specific set of circumstances. So you're going to need to be around a place where you can use this. If your base is built by water plants and maybe you remember that it's almost dawn, maybe you go pick up a little bit of water with a Dew Reaper if you have one available to you. But otherwise, this is not going to be a very efficient way of getting water, because it's going to require a lot of active engagement from you, and that is going to be time that you could spend elsewhere more productively. So this is more of just like kind of like if you really need water, you can go for this method, but otherwise I don't like to use this method as my primary source of water gathering. Now the next method we're going to talk about is another one that is pretty basic. This is one of the earliest ones the game introduces you to, and that is going to be using the blood purifier machine. Now the blood purifier machine is a simple machine that's going to convert blood into water. Now there are going to be 2 versions of this. One is going to be more basic and one is going to be a bigger, more advanced one, which is going to have better efficiency. Now it is important to note you're going to need to extract this blood using a couple of tools such as the blood extractor. Now the most basic one is going to provide you a smaller quantity of blood when you do extract it from dead enemies. Now you're also going to need a place to store this blood, and that is going to be through blood bags. Now there are going to be various levels of blood bags. You're going to start off with a small one. You can upgrade to a medium one with research points, and you're going to obviously have to craft them, and then you're going to move on to larger ones, which is going to allow you to store more blood. Likewise with the blood extractor, you're also going to have various levels. You're going to have Mark 1, Mark 2, and so on, and this is going to allow you to extract more blood from downed enemies, which is going to obviously improve the efficiency and allow you to get more blood for your machines. However, the machine itself doesn't have a massive capacity. It's 24,000 milliliters, which isn't terrible in the beginning, but towards the later stages of the game, when you do have the more advanced extractors, that can actually fill up very quickly if you have large blood packs and more advanced extractors. And this is again going to require quite a lot of investment from you as a player. You're going to have to obviously keep this device equipped, and you're going to have to extract a lot of blood from fallen enemies, which is going to take some time because each enemy you're going to have to go to, you're going to have to extract large amounts of blood. I wouldn't really make use of this method unless you have the more advanced blood extractor devices that can actually pull a lot more blood. This will make it a bit more worthwhile. The earlier ones aren't going to be producing that much. You're going to have to sift through a large amount of enemies to get a reasonable amount of blood, and then you're still going to have to wait quite a while for the blood to turn into water, which is not going to be a very efficient method. I do like to make sure that I have a blood pact or 2 on hand at all times, especially if you're using the knife as your melee weapon, because when you do end up using the knife, it is going to, every time you stab enemies, you're going to constantly be generating generating small amounts of blood for your blood packs, this is going to be a nice way to passively generate you a little bit of blood. And after a while, you can obviously just dump it into your blood purifier. However, I wouldn't make use of this as your primary source of water, at least not in the mid to late games. In the early game, it's still fine. It is going to be one of the few methods you can get to use water, but once you progress far enough into the mid and late game, there are going to be much better options than this. This one is going to take a little bit too much time investment from the player, and I do think there are going to be a lot better methods to just kind of alleviate some of your time, allowing you to do things more productively. So speaking of productively, now we're going to get to the more interesting methods of gathering water. Now, the one that most people have probably thought is going to be the best method, this one is going to be a passive generation of water, which is actually very nice, and that is going to be the wind trap. Now, the wind trap has a couple of things going for it. It is going to be a large automatic machine that is going to generate you amounts of water passively, and there are going to be a couple of things you need to be aware of. This is going to be a fairly expensive machine, especially considering you need 90 steel ingots in order to craft this. That is going to be fairly difficult to obtain in the mid game, as steel ingots are going to take quite a little bit of water in order to achieve this, and a lot of time and resource gathering. Not only that, but it's also going to have a power cost of 75, which is going to be a fairly expensive machine to run, and it is going to be a lot of headache in order to keep this going, since you are going to also, on top of that, you're going to need to have filtration systems which are going to degrade over time, so you're going to need to keep refreshing these. They do last a fair while. There are a couple of different tiers you can get for the filtration systems. It's also going to require 5 plant fibers, and it's also going to require 60 water to make one of these. It is going to last several hours each one, and you are going to be able to stack, I believe it's up to 5 of these per machine at a given time. You're also going to then be able to build the more advanced one, which is going to be the standard filter. This one's going to be requiring 5 aluminium, which is a resource that's a lot harder to get. It's also going to require 120 water, 10 plant fiber, and 4 silicon blocks in order to build this. And considering you can stack the same amount as the makeshift filter, this is obviously going to give you much longer periods of time before you have to replace them. Then there's also going to be the particle filter. Now, this one is going to be the most advanced one. This one is going to require 340 water. It's also going to require 6 duraluminum ingots, and it's also going to require 15 plant fiber, as well as 8 silicon blocks, as well as also 15 spice residues. So this one's going to be a much more difficult one to achieve. It's going to give you a lot longer duration, of course, but the resource requirement for this one is going to be quite steep. So unless you're in the very late games and you have abundance of these resources, probably not a good idea to use this one. Stick to the first 2 for the time being. Now, the water system is going to generate you a slow but steady passive amount of water. The water that's going to generate you is going to be 0.75 per second, which isn't terrible, and that's great for when you leave the game off overnight and you'll be able to generate passive water overnight, especially if you have a medium or larger water system in your base where you can stockpile a lot of excess water, because when your devices do end up filling themselves up with water, they overspill any excess water directly into any available water canisters. So wherever you place your water canisters, so long as they're in your base, they are going to fill up with water if you do end up having any kind of overspill or excess water generations. So these wind traps are going to be great for when you do end up either going for long periods of time outside of your base or when you log off. However, this is still not going to be the best source of getting water, since it is going to give you a fairly slow income of water. It's going to require you to constantly upkeep these with filtration systems. There is still going to be a necessity for player interaction in order to keep these things going, and of course the ongoing power consumption, so you're going to need to have more generators in order to keep these sustained. Now let's talk about the large wind trap. This one is going to be a much later game version of the regular wind trap. This one is going to be quite expensive to craft. This one is going to require you to have 240 duraluminum ingots. It's also going to require you to have 250 silicon blocks as well, and it's also going to require you to have 70 calibrated servox, and you're going to need to have 5 spice melange, which is going to be quite a lot of resources in order to craft this. It's also going to have a power cost of 150, which is going to be very high. This is going to be double of the regular one. However, this is going to also likewise double your passive water generation from 0.75 up to 1.4 per second. Now, this is obviously going to give you a lot more water, but it's also going to come with a very steep price, and that is going to be quite a lot of resources you're going to need to grind in order to build this machine, which is also going to be resources you could have put elsewhere more efficiently. This is also once again going to require the various filters. Depending which one you are going to have is going to depend on how often you're going to have to replace them. If you are at this stage of the game, you're probably going to end up using the more advanced filters, which is obviously going to allow you to go for longer durations of time before you're going to need to replace these. However, this is still going to require you to have a lot of power generation for this, and it's also going to require a very big resource commitment in order to build these. So I'm not sure if I would recommend going for this route, because there are still going to be other methods of gathering water which are actually going to be a lot better than all of these methods we just discussed, and it's going to be cheaper. So without without further ado, let's talk about my favorite method, or the best method in the game by far, something that's probably going to get nerfed, to be honest, later down the line. I don't think this is going to last very long because this is just completely broken. It makes all the other methods pretty much irrelevant compared to this one, and that is going to be by using the deathstill. Now, the deathstill is going to be a unique crafting item which you're going to be able to unlock by completing the journey where you do end up doing quests for Fremen. This is going to be introduced to you early on in the game, in the early stages of the tutorial, where you're going to do things like the first trial of Akil, and then you're going to, each time you do this, you're going to unlock another trial, and you can do these quite early in the game. They don't really have any level requirements, and you are going to need to go to locations that might be a little bit more difficult, but honestly, as long as you have a bike or a vehicle to get to these locations, it shouldn't be difficult. You can blast through these quite easily. You could probably do them in like 2 or 3 hours. And if you do all of these quests, you're going to unlock the deathstill. Now, the deathstill is going to be by far the best way to get water in the entire game, as you're going to be able to get 25,000 water every single hour by having this machine. And what's the catch, you might ask? Well, all you need to do is put a dead body into it, because it's going to basically liquidate them and turn them into water. Now, that's not very difficult to do, because once you unlock this machine, when you do end up having down enemies, you will have an option where you can hold F to pick their body up. You can take them back to base, put them in the deathstill. An hour later, you get 25,000 water, which is going to be obviously quite insane. That is going to equate to 6.9 water per second, which we can pretty much round off to 7. So compared to the wind trap, which is going to give you 0.75 per second, this is going to give you 7 per second, which is almost 10 times the efficiency, which is going to be a much better way of getting water. However, the deathstill isn't without its downsides. It is going to have a very high power consumption of 200, which means you're going to have some wind turbines around in order to make sure this is powered. You're also going to need 60 steel ingots, as well as 28 silicon blocks, and also 32 complex machineries, which you can find by looting the various Imperial testing facilities. It is important to note, though, that this is going to be the best method of getting water. The requirements to build it aren't that hard. It's a pretty easy machine to build, far easier than even the basic wind trap, in my opinion. And it's going to give you a lot more resources. This one is even going to outshine the more advanced wind trap, and it's going to do so without that much commitment from you. Now, if you're out exploring, you do end up killing an enemy, pick them up, bring them back to base, put in the machine, come back an hour later, 25,000 water, boom, done. It's going to eliminate your water problem. You're not going to have a problem with water anymore. And if that is still not enough for you, if you really still need more water, there is an even better method to get water, and this is going to be objectively the best method in the entire game. So don't worry about it too much until you get to the late game. It's going to be the advanced deathstill. Same concept. You put one body in, after 50 minutes, you get 45,000 water, which means you're going to be getting a total of 15 water every single second on average, as long as there's a body inside of it. However, it is also going to come with some downsides. The first downside, it's going to have a whopping power consumption of 500, which is going to be a monumental power consumption. It's also going to be fairly expensive to craft, as it's going to require 240 duraluminum ingots. It's also going to require 170 silicon blocks, and it's going to require 70 complex machinery. But once you do end up having this, 45,000 water is going to be a massive amount. Compare that even to the large wind trap, which is only going to give you 1.4 water per second. You can see how much more efficient this is going to be. Once you have these deathstills built, it is going to make the late game so much easier. All you got to do to get these is you got to finish all the quests for the Find the Fremen quest line. This is going to take you to various caves all around the map, and when you do end up going to all of them, you will end up getting the knowledge of how to craft the deathstills. So make sure you end up doing those. Just go from location to location, and it should be fairly easy to find them. It also usually describes to you in your journal where you can find these locations, but we'll also mark them up with like a little purple cave icon indicating that those are going to be the tombs you have to visit. You do have to visit them in order, however, but if you do, you'll obviously get one of the best items in the entire game. Anyway, I hope this video helps you. Hopefully this will give you a lot more water so you can use your time more efficiently to do other more exciting things and gather more other important resources, so you don't have to sit there kind of just waiting for your water to generate while you have nothing else to do. This is going to give you the most important resource in the game in an overabundance. And if the video did help you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And if you do know any other interesting tips or tricks in Dune Awakening, leave them in the comment section below. I would love to see them, and I'll see you guys again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.